Now that we went through every position and ranked the best player from it, we're mashing them all together and ranking the top 30 players of all time, at least in my opinion. We did the same for current players, and I wasn't even sure I was going to make this all-time one, but it's been getting requested a lot, so here we go. Keep in mind, just like every ranking video, everyone's got their own opinions on their lists. I'm going to do my best explaining why I ranked each player where, but if you disagree, just go ahead with your hate comments and roast me. Number 30, John Stockton. All-time leader in steals, all-time leader in assists, great defender, solid scorer, and was a perfect second option on what should have been a championship Jazz team, if it wasn't for Michael Jordan. 29, John Havlicek. Havlicek doesn't get talked about often, but there's no denying that he's still one of the best two-way players the NBA has ever seen. Averaged 29, 9, and 7 in his best season, while making the all-defensive first team. 28, Allen Iverson. When I was putting together this list, I wasn't sure whether or not AI was going to make the cut, but he did end up making it. League MVP, carried his team to the finals on his back, one of the greatest scorers ever. It would have been tough leaving him off this list. Number 27, Isaiah Thomas. Isaiah over AI was a close one. Thomas was like the original Chris Paul. He was an elite defender, and even though he didn't put up the numbers that Iverson did, he was a true leader and led his team to victory, which was how under him they won 2 straight championships. 26, Kawhi Leonard. I know, bit of a controversial one here. Everyone likes to shit on Kawhi because he sits out games, and some people say he's better than LeBron, which leads to a whole debate. But it's hard to argue against Leonard here, because the only thing he hasn't done in the NBA is win a league MVP. Aside from that though, he's one of the best two-way players ever, because he's a monster on defense and is averaging 27 a game these days on offense. Plus he's won 2 defensive player awards, 2 finals MVPs, 2 championships, leads his team to wins wherever he goes, and does everything else from passing to shooting. I think as the years go on, only gonna rank higher, but for now he still does make it in the top 30. 25, Scottie Pippen. So this one's weird because to me, Kawhi's the better overall player. He's about the same as Pippen on defense and is the much better offensive player. But for now, I had to rank Scottie slightly higher because of his 6 rings. 24, Elgin Baylor. He's an all-time great and one of the best players of all time, with him averaging 38 and 18 in his prime. Would rank higher, but the fact that he never won a championship does drop him down a bit. Number 23, Dwayne Wade. I know this seems like an odd place to have Wade, but after a lot of back and forth, this is where I felt that he should be ranked. If you look back, prime, especially 2060 Wade, was playing at a rate that only very few other players have ever done. Then after his prime as a second option to LeBron James, for the most part he made the transition into that role look pretty effortless. And that's not something all stars can do. Plus, he really was one of the most complete shooting guards that there ever was. An excellent scorer, great passer, solid rebounder, and a great shot blocker. His 2 championships with LeBron helped his ranking some, but his 2006 ring is what took him to the next level. Number 22, Moses Malone. Moses rarely ever gets the credit he deserves in conversations like these, but he deserves it. One of the greatest rebounders of all time, and even though he never won a championship, he probably would have if he hadn't bounced around 7 different teams in his NBA career. And I say that because even though he did, he still won 3 MVP awards. 21, David Robinson. If it's not Moses, then David is definitely the most underrated center in NBA history. He wasn't a fancy player or anything, but he could literally do everything on the court, which was how he won 2 NBA championships, a league MVP, was a defensive player of the year, scoring champ, rebounding leader, and a blocks leader at one point. Number 20, Dr. J. Guys like LeBron James refer to Dr. J as a top 5 NBA player of all time. And during his prime, maybe, but a lot of that was spent in the ABA, so he did lose some rankings because of that. Number 19, Charles Barkley. As a 6'6" power forward, most players would be at a disadvantage. But even with that, Barkley was quicker and stronger than most other power forwards in the league at the time. Most notably though, he won a 1993 MVP award over Michael Jordan, then took him to 6 games in the NBA Finals. Even as he got older though, he found ways to dominate without as much pure athleticism. 18, Kevin Garnett. Some people have Charles Barkley over KG, but I couldn't do it. I have Garnett as a top 4 power forward of all time. He also won an MVP, helped his team win a championship, did everything else just as good as Barkley except score, but Kevin was a much better overall player because of his defense and his ability to shoot the ball. In KG's early days, he was a monster, and if the Wolves would have gotten more help, he wouldn't have needed to go to Boston to win his championship. 17, Karl Malone. The fact that Malone's not even in the top 15 shows just how much talent we've seen throughout the history of the league. And he is a big step up from Kevin Garnett, with the 2 MVPs and the flat out dominance over the 20 years that he played in Utah. but we just couldn't rank him over Dirk Nowitzki at 16, and it's something that I talked about in my all-time power forward ranking video, because Dirk won a championship on his own over the guy who at the time was the best player in the league. But Malone couldn't, and in fact, Dirk almost won 2 titles if the 2006 finals wouldn't have been rigged. So that and changing the game the way he did is why I put Nowitzki slightly over Karl Malone. 15, Jerry West. A lot of people have West right outside their top 10, and that's believable. He really was that good, but what made me drop him down a bit was the fact that he has a 1-8 record in the NBA Finals. 14, Oscar Robertson. Almost every list that I found had Oscar Robertson at 11. It was like everyone was agreed that that's where he belonged. Maybe 10 or so years ago though, because some new players have come up and he's dropped down a bit, at least in my mind. Like number 13 with Kevin Durant. Honestly, it's sad to say, but depending on how he comes back from his Achilles tear, this may be as high as he climbs on the all-time rankings. He's got a lot of competition ahead of him, so if the injury takes away even a little bit of his game, that might be enough to prevent him from moving up any. But the career he's had up until this point was still great. He's already cemented his legacy as one of the best players of all time, one of the most unstoppable players of all time, and one of the best scorers ever. We've never seen someone like him score at such a high volume while being so efficient, and don't forget, he's also a very underrated defender. Plus, okay, even though we can all agree that his championships really don't mean much, he's still got 2 in the record books, and we can't take that away from him. Number 12, Steph Curry. A bit of a controversial one here. Not only do we have him this close to the top 10, which some people don't agree with, but we also have him over Kevin. Well, for having him over KD, Steph won 2 MVPs, and if KD hadn't have joined the Warriors when he did, it could have been more with that streak he was on. And he won a championship of his own on his own against LeBron. Not even to mention that he's one of the only guys that you can say, for the most part, is just as efficient as Durant. Steph's never had a Finals MVP, and when Durant on the team, he was the first option slightly over Curry. But when you look at all-time legacy, I think Steph still tops him. And that brings us to why he's so close to the top 10. Well, for one, I mean, he's been better than every other player mentioned before him, including Oscar Robertson, who, like I said, is or was almost unanimously everyone's 11th best player. And for what he's done for the game, it was an easy choice to include him here. I wouldn't have put him any higher though, because at 11 we have Hakeem Olajuwon. I know this is way too low for Hakeem. I understand how underrated he is and how he doesn't get enough credit for how good he was. It's nothing against him, it's just that with the players ahead of him, somebody had to be dropped down, and it had to be him. It'll make more sense when we see the rest of the list though. But for Hakeem, no center ever had the combination of offense, defense, and pure skill that he had on the court, which were the main factors that contributed to him deserving this spot. Number 10, we have Wilt Chamberlain. And I know, again, same thing, most people have Wilt Chamberlain like 5th or 6th, and when mapping out this list in my head, that's where I thought I was gonna have him, because he was the most dominant player of his era and of any era. His lack of championships though, against Bill Russell, was an excuse that I did have for dropping his ranking. That wasn't a problem for number 9 though in Tim Duncan, who without question is unanimously pretty much in everyone's top 10 players list. It's really hard to ever see anyone topping the career that Tim Duncan had as a power forward. I mean, I say that as Giannis could very well be on his way to his 2nd MVP at 25 years old, but still, Duncan was the total package even coming into the league. He came in averaging 20 and 11, was dominant on both ends, and already winning championships early on. And honestly, he kept up that theme for most of his career, ultimately winning 2 MVPs, 5 championships, made the all-defensive first team 8 times, while being an all-time great leader and arguably the best all-around power forward ever. And even though he didn't play like a true superstar like LeBron or Michael Jordan, there's no doubt that he still was one. Number 8, Shaq. Okay, I had to rank Shaq higher than Wilt, mainly because I'm not taking anything away from Wilt, but you don't think that if you drop Shaq in the 60s that he also would have averaged 50 a game? There's no doubt that he would have. And Tim could easily be switched out for Shaq here, but I gave this one to O'Neal because even though he had a much shorter prime than Duncan did, Shaq's prime was much better, and he actually did play like a true superstar. Number 7, another controversial one here. 7 for Kobe Bryant is pretty high on a top 30 list, I know, but here's my reasoning. Shaq was the slightly better player during their 3-peat together, I'll admit that, but keep in mind, at that time, Kobe was around 22 years old, so that's like today Jason Tatum playing alongside LeBron, and all the fans trying to determine who's better. The fact that there was even a discussion for that based on where these guys were in their careers speaks a lot on how good Kobe was. Also, Bryant won 2 titles and made 3 finals appearances after Shaq, while Shaq only won 1 thanks to Dwayne Wade. So that's why I have him over Shaq. The 5 titles for me puts him over Wilt, and Tim Duncan could have easily ranked over Kobe, but since I had to put Kobe over Shaq and Shaq over Tim Duncan, it just ended up like this. Number 6, Bill Russell. So as you'll see, the top 6 is where things get pretty easy. Now think of Bill Russell as the old version of Tim Duncan. Didn't get crazy stats compared to other guys of his time, but always led his team to championships. Just like Tim could beat Shaq and guys like LeBron, Russell did the same thing to guys like Wilt Chamberlain. Number 5 then goes to Larry Bird, and some people discredit Bird and put him lower, but for who he was right behind Magic Johnson the whole way. Magic was always slightly better, but not by much, and not by enough to rank anyone in between these two, which of course means Magic Johnson comes in at number 4, and there's no arguing. 5-time champ, 3-time MVP, and honestly will probably always be the greatest point guard of all time. I mean, can you imagine the dominance and career a player would have to pass Magic for this spot? We saw Steph Curry change the way the entire game is played, and he only got up to number 12. Number 3, Kareem. 6-time champ, 6-time NBA champ, 6-time MVP, and let's not forget, Magic wouldn't have his without Kareem. The same could be said for Kareem though, but his entire career ranks him ahead of Johnson. Never lost a game in college, 3-time NCAA champ, completely dominated in Milwaukee, then proved to do the same for the Lakers, giving him one of the greatest careers ever. Then number 2 goes to LeBron, and LeBron's definitely the second greatest player of all time. He didn't have the second greatest career of all time, but he's the second greatest that we've ever seen. I mean, nobody expected him to play this good this long, and it's still hard to believe. You know, I thought maybe this year playing with AD, he'd take the role as a second option to AD and start playing like Dwayne Wade did when they played together. But no, instead he becomes his team's actual point guard, leads the league in assists, and his points per game only dropped a little bit even though he's doing all that and making that transition. So he hasn't dropped off a bit. Then number 1, Michael Jordan. If you enjoyed the video though, like and subscribe, and for anything you disagree with, I know everyone has something they want to get off their chest right now. Comment it down below and let me hear it.